McIntosh going to the top of your screen. That's where Bennett will throw it. McIntosh makes a move. Touchdown, Georgia.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
Jacoby trying to go downfield, though. There's Zay at the 10. Inside the 5, he'll score once again.
365 Sports is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
Rising over the middle, and it's caught. Dalton Kincaid to the outside. He's home free. Touchdown, Utah.
365 Sports is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952.
Pump fake to the right side, looking back left, gives it to Gibbs, got running room, 35-30. Gibbs makes a man miss, 25-20, down the sideline, 10, inside the 5, makes a man miss again, into the end zone, touchdown, Alabama, Jahmyr Gibbs, what a move, Crimson Tide, a 37-yard touchdown play.
Have you subscribed to our YouTube channel? Search 365 Sports on YouTube. Brought to you by TFNB, your bank for life.
Second down, right side, and it's picked off again. It's Christian Gonzalez with his second interception this quarter.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
And here we go this Tuesday afternoon. In 30 minutes, we'll hear from former Baylor guard and ESPN basketball analyst King McClure. We'll also hear later today in the 5 o'clock hour from Baylor women's head coach Nikki Collin. Jamie Pollard, the director of athletics at Iowa State, John McClain Hall of Fame columnist, Craig's Off the Radar, Paul's Top 5, and, of course, a few other nuggets as well. We'll have a couple of comments from Washington State President Kirk Schultz to the Wilner hotline on the Pac-12 and what presidents in that conference are saying, at least to each other from his comments. But we start today with news that just came down a minute ago. Alabama men's basketball, which right now is the #1 overall seed in all of basketball, and a team that is favored to be a part of the Final Four based on projections. This is from alabamasports.com or alabama.com. Darius Miles, a former Alabama player who has been at least charged with murder in a shooting with a young lady and a friend, texted Brandon Miller, who's a star player at Alabama, to bring a gun and to kill, that eventually killed Jameer Jonah Harris. Now, that's the story. It's very complicated, but this just came out in the last 30 minutes or so. Now, this is also a couple of the other notes about this story. From Austin Hannon. Nate Oats, when asked about the situation with Brandon Miller, who is possibly an All-American player, about his involvement in the Darius Miles situation, quote, "We've known the situation. We've been fully cooperating with law enforcement. We closed practice in prayer today. You can't control everything someone does, and then wrong spot at the wrong time." Now, don't go to the third one, Garrett. Let's discuss this a little bit. That seems to be a very generic comment from the head coach at Alabama.
Okay, Brandon Miller is a potential lottery pick in this draft coming up in the NBA. He is one of the best players, if not the best player on Alabama's team. So when it comes to, allegations of special treatment in this case here, like, there's no doubt about it. The fact that he hasn't been suspended for being involved in this at all, and when your friend calls you, here's what why I don't understand what Nate Oats and Alabama aren't getting in this. When Darius Miles called Brandon Miller to bring him his gun, what did Brandon Miller think that Darius Miles was going to do with it? And, I mean, if any of you right now texted me tonight and said, "Paul, I need you to bring me a gun right now," my first question would be like, why? I mean, why do you want a gun? And then it's used in a murder, and local police say they can't charge him with anything because all he did was hand the gun. But to me, that sounds like accessory to murder. I don't know. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not sure. But that is, I mean, wrong place, wrong time. No S.
No.
Nate Oats, but still, like, wrong decision all the way around.
When I was reading that quote, Craig, I saw you kind of shaking your head. There's another story that we didn't even have on our radar 30 minutes ago. But obviously right now this is going to be interesting on what happens with Miller moving forward, and also the Alabama men's basketball team, which has been ranked number 1 most of the year, Houston, this week.
Yeah, I don't follow Nate Oats very closely. I just know he's a terrific basketball coach, and obviously they're having a great year. But what a moronic statement. I mean, what a stupid statement from a grown man to make, a leader of young men to make. I mean, how embarrassing. And if you're an Alabama fan who's like, what do you mean? I mean, read the statement again. How would you not be embarrassed if you have a brain that actually functions? That your head basketball coach just basically dismissed a guy bringing a gun to an eventual murder, whether he willingly knew or not that it was going to be used in a murder. I'm sorry. Maybe I just grew up differently. I don't have friends calling me asking me to bring them guns. I mean, I understand everybody comes from different backgrounds and whatnot. But, I mean, are we really sitting here trying to act like somebody being called to bring a gun to a situation and that situation turns into murder is just like bad, wrong place, wrong time? How did he end up in that place? And at that time, he got a call. What was that call about? For him to bring a gun? And nobody's acting like that. I mean, not that nobody, but Nate Oats is really acting and just brushing that off like it's another day at the office for college kids. I mean, spare me, dude. Like, what a BS response from Nate Oats. And a response that, I'm sure he hopes is just going to brush this thing right along and everybody will just move on. He's not going to be in trouble. Okay, we can just keep watching him dunk basketballs then and follow his journey to the NBA, and this is just a speed bump. I mean, give me a freaking break, dude. I don't know that he deserves to be charged based on the letter of the law in Alabama. I saw some back and forth on that. So I don't know that there's just this rock-solid accessory to murder charge, and clearly there's no charge against him at all, which is hard to imagine that you bring the murder weapon to an eventual murder. Whether you knowingly knew that or not, you're still bringing a gun and giving it to someone who it does not belong to. That's a no-no. You don't go passing guns around. There's serial numbers for a reason. There's the laws that we do have, whether they're good enough or not, depends on who you ask on any given day. But without delving into that, I mean, there are pretty general rules that we know about, and you don't just go willy-nilly just giving guns off to people. You just don't do that because of reasons like this. And I could kind of, see from a background standpoint, I mean, and I don't know enough about the guys involved. Like, did you grow up in a rough neighborhood where this was commonplace and you truly have no idea how stupid this is and you really don't know any better? I'd like to give basically everybody the benefit of the doubt and believe that they're all smart enough to know better. So either he wasn't smart enough to know, and that's problematic enough as it is, that's just like that people operate handing off guns and don't realize how bad that is, or he knowingly was giving a gun knowing that it could be used in a situation like this. Either way, it looks bad, but Nate Oates' comments make it look way worse. I mean, leader of young men, and look, I'm sure he's great in a lot of other areas, and yes, he's a great coach, obviously, but that's a lame excuse for a comment right there. I mean, come on. Be better. Like, I hate to say that term because it's just so generic, but I mean, geez Louise, Nate Oates, are you kidding me? I mean, he didn't, that's so silly.
And this isn't Clue, right? So it's not like you called him to bring you a candlestick and then, oh, yeah, sure, you need a candlestick? I'll bring you the candlestick. And then you killed somebody with a candlestick. Now, I get that might be a dividing line with like a knife. Like if you called up and said, hey, can you bring me a really sharp kitchen knife? I'd be like, oh, it must be, filleting a steak or something tonight. Yeah, he needs my good kitchen knife. So I bring that to him. There I have a reasonable expectation that knife is going to be used for something that is not murder or killing or hurting someone. But a gun has one purpose. It's not like I go and tenderize meat by firing bullets into it. Like, that's not what you do. So,
but people own guns.
Yeah, but like if you call, like,
I'm just,
again,
I understand.
people own guns.
Yeah.
But if you were asking, like, anything else in the world, you almost asked me to borrow. Like, if you wanted to borrow my car and you wound up hitting somebody with it, if I'm not with you, I'm like, well, that wasn't my only fault. Is not making sure you're a better driver. But I'm not an accessory to that because there was just I gave you the car because you said, yeah, can I you borrow your car for an hour? Okay, that's fine. But when you ask, a gun is made for one thing. And I get that there is a kind of a ridiculous debate on what they're for, but a gun is used for one thing. It's built for one thing. And so when you give it to someone, you assume that they're going to, at best, shoot at a target and nothing else. But that is even still, because of what it's designed for, a really crappy excuse for why, I didn't know anything was it.
John Talty, who covers Alabama, we've had him on this show at times in the past, regardless of whether Brandon Miller legally did anything wrong, whether he's an accessory or whatever it might be, bringing a gun that resulted in the death of a human being isn't wrong spot at wrong time. I'm flabbergasted Nate Oats actually used those words to describe the situation. And by the way, when people are dead in that same story, wrong place at wrong time. I'm also a little bit confused on the quote, and I can probably try to get updated on this, when he mentioned that they closed practice today in prayer, but in that same quote prior to that, that they've been involved in working with authorities. So why was today's practice closed in prayer?
Throw a little Jesus on it. It's all these college coaches do most of the time. I mean, truly, it's really gross. I mean, it is. If anything goes wrong, just, where's Jesus? Let's go get Jesus in the mix, and everything's fine, because you can't yell at me. I'm a Christian, man. It's freaking despicable, dude. It really is. And, look, I'm not judging Nate Oats all on this, but I do hate that move that seemingly every college coach who needs to answer for something now makes. Like, where's Jesus? Let's go get the Jesus card out, because we're being under a microscope now over something that we did. I mean, not to question the man's faith. I'm sure he's a man full of faith, has a great relationship with God. That's not the time to invoke it, man. I mean, come on, dude. I mean, what are we even doing here? And look, I'm sure there's Alabama fan or a person who is, a fan or whatever that says, well, I mean, it was his gun he was asking for. That makes it slightly better, but that still doesn't answer the question of you texting your teammate and him being dumb enough to go grab you your gun and bring it to you without going like, what do you think it's for? Like, could I possibly get in trouble by bringing a gun to a situation where clearly something's going awry? He's not at the gun range. He's not out in the woods hunting. Why would he need a gun in this situation? And nobody questioned that was involved here. I just, this isn't like, hey, could you bring me my wallet? It's like, bring me my gun. And then, on top of that, if you want to say it was as simple as like a guy forgot his credit card or something, all you have to do is look at the text messages. And when Miller got to the scene, Miles told his now former teammate, so Darius Miles' teammate, and there was 20-year-old Michaels Davis. But when Miller got to the scene, Miles told Davis the heat is in the hat to let him know that a gun was there. And then Miles added, there's one in the head, a.k.a. there's one in the chamber. And then got the girlfriend out of the way, and eventually a murder commences. And so, yeah, like, I understand there's young kids and dumb things happen and all that. And, people will be charged the way that they need to be charged according to the letter of the law. I'm not sitting here banging my fist asking for, like, first-degree murder charges on everybody involved. I don't know enough about the situation, but I do know that was a really dumb response by Nate Oats. Like, that was a stupid response.
It's one of the top-rated teams. Go ahead and finish.
That's just you have to know better in that position as a head coach. And I understand things happen with college kids and that, but like he dismisses this like it was a DUI or something. And look, that's serious as well. Not to make light of that at all, but somebody was killed by the gun that your player brought due to an altercation involving another player who's now charged with murder and in jail. And you're saying, let's throw a little prayer on it.
Miles asked Miller to bring the gun. Miller brought the gun, and then Miles, according to what I'm reading, then told Davis where the gun was, as you mentioned.
Who's the third wheel in this that committed the murder.
It'll be interesting to see how this unwinds. Listen, it's a bad situation all the way around. You can sit there and look at the quotes with Nate Oats, or you can look at how long have they known this? Should Miller have been playing? I am not making that decision because I don't know all the timeline. I do know this happened, back in January 15th in Tuscaloosa, the killing of Jonah Harris, who was 23 years old. All right, so there's that today, and I hate to kind of have to start it with that, but it's enough to where we have to you're talking about, and it's about human life. But then also we're a talk show that covers sports, and Alabama is one of the favorites to win the national title. And so you wonder how this spirals for them distraction, brings them closer together. What Nate Oats has to deal with now, along with Miller, who's a star player for a team that has been ranked number 1 at times during the season.
Yeah, and let's face it, I mean, that's the reason why there's a lot of fans who are just like, oh, y'all are blowing it out of proportion. And I'm just saying y'all generally, like whether it be Twitter or whether it's some other show or what have you. And it's like, I'm not calling for anybody to be fired. I just think it's ridiculous. Like if Nate Oats had gone up there and just cut out the Jesus part of it and also cut out the college kids are out, like that's just like, this is just something that happens commonplace, you know, like just going and giving guns to people and murders happening and like just wrong place, wrong time. I mean, like if you just leave that part of it out, I can kind of understand of like, hey, it's a bad situation, blah, blah, blah. We didn't practice. We said prayers. Like I can even be more open-minded to that. But the whole acting as though this is just like this is what happens with college kids. No, it does not. This is not regular with most college kids by any means. And we shouldn't try to make it sound like it's just a bad timing situation. No, there were decisions made and choices made that people should know better. Bottom line. And the adult in the room shouldn't be dismissing these terrible decisions as though it's just, oops, college kids. No, that's not how that should have been handled, in my opinion. But great basketball coach. We'll see how it rolls with the rest of their team. And I just hate it for everybody involved. It's a terrible situation.
Show memo. I need you to clarify this. A young teenager made a mistake. He did not kill anyone. Seems the Big 12 wants to seem as if they are squeaky clean. What in the blanking F are you talking about?
Yeah.
I sometimes just wish I wouldn't read some of the stupid things said or written. What in the hell does the Big 12 have to do with Alabama having a player who provided a gun to a friend, who gave it to another friend, or told him where it was to kill somebody and take a life? What does the Big 12 have to do with anything we just discussed? You think we wanted to talk about this story? We didn't even have it planned on the show. Show memo? That's a stupid, ignorant comment for you on the chat room. Is that who we are now, that if somebody makes a comment about a team in another conference, it's conference against conference, like all the bullshit that was going on between the Pac-12 and the Big 12 and fans and whatever else that still is there? What a dumb comment. What in the hell were you thinking when you wrote that down? I've got to ask you that. God almighty, what in the hell were you thinking when you said that? Like the Big 12 is laughing at Alabama because they're a part of the SEC? The Big 12's had problems. Baylor's had their problems, bad ones. It's hard to talk about. But if you don't think we should talk about it, go watch some other show. We don't need you involved. We love everybody. It's a family we've built for the last 2.5 years. But that right there, show memo, is just plain stupid. And we'd rather you not be a part of it than that stupid comment like the Big 12 thinks they're better. What the hell did you think when you wrote that down?
Roll Tide.
Yeah, well.
God almighty, we sometimes dig ourselves into these stupid discussions.
Enough
idiot,
already.
Idiot.
Yeah. Okay, seriously,
right,
you're
done.
being ridiculous. Just calm down.
No, I'm not the one being ridiculous, but thank you.
But, look, the Baylor University experienced a very similar situation. A very similar situation that almost ended their basketball program completely. And, one player murdered another and hid his body in a field. And the coach lied about it when it came to it. So Nate Oats should know better, and that's the bigger issue here. And it has nothing to do with, gun ownership or anything like that or all that. It's pretty clear that Nate Oats excused away a stupid decision by a player that got someone murdered. At best, that's what he did. And even if the state of Alabama can't charge Brandon Miller with a crime, maybe you could suspend him for making a bad decision. Because most of the things kids get suspended for, most of the things they get suspended for aren't crimes and don't wind up with the end of that story being a girl was murdered. Most of the things they get suspended for is missing practice, not doing well, bad grades and all that. There's no law that says you have to go to practice. That's it. I mean, you can suspend him. Bad decision, getting too drunk at a party and being late, like all that stuff. None of that's really against the law, but you still suspend players for it. And the fact that he's like, well, he's wrong place, wrong time. We got a big game this week. That's just ridiculous.
All right, so there's that. I'm not saying, Craig, that I'm not being an idiot. I was being an idiot. I let an idiot affect me, and I was ready for this show. We got a lot of good things to talk about today. Now, last night, Kansas, they did it again. They found a way. There were about 5 plays in the last 5 minutes. Baylor plays at Kansas State tonight. There's some other games, and we'll get to those as well in the Big 12, including Iowa State at Texas, and what would be a hell of a game, and Texas Tech in Norman against Oklahoma. There were about 5 plays in the last 5 minutes of that game in Fort Worth where TCU and KU were down the stretch. And every one of those plays that mattered, the tough plays, the mentally tough, the physically tough plays, to me, Kansas made all 5 of them. Won the game 63-58, and they keep on winning. They're at the top. Texas can tie them again if they win tonight at the top of the Big 12 standings. Baylor tries to bounce back. We'll have King McClure to discuss all of it here in about 10 minutes. So there's that from last night. And West Virginia just tortured Oklahoma State badly last night, winning by nearly 20 in their particular game. Evan Miyakawa, he does a lot of analytics. This is small print, but he had a bracket. He's going to do this probably like 50 times. We've had Evan on the show. The national champion, guess who he has as the national champion, speaking of which, based on just the first of many bracket simulations. Alabama. Final 4, Alabama, Houston, Creighton, and Rutgers. So, again, this is a simulation. Has it Northwestern in the Elite 8? Just a simulation. He could do this in about 5 minutes. It could have 4 completely different teams, but it's kind of fun to watch. Go watch him on Twitter at Evan Mia, M-I-Y-A. And speaking of which, he had Kansas, Paul, getting knocked out in the same bracket with Rutgers in the second round. He had TCU going to the regional final, losing to Creighton. Kansas State, Texas, Oklahoma State, and Iowa State all getting knocked out in the second round. This is with the best conference in America. Baylor out in the first round to Vermont, and West Virginia loses to Northwestern. He can run this in 5 minutes, and all these teams are in the regional semifinals and better. But I just wanted to share that first one with you. He'll do that quite a bit over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things that can happen. I'm of the thought that actually this year that once the Big 12 gets to play, and I think you saw this a little bit in the Big 12 SEC Challenge, especially Oklahoma versus Alabama, but when the Big 12 doesn't have to play themselves for at least a couple games, I think for the most part, based on individual matchups, they'll do pretty well. I think they're probably going to get 8 teams in, at least 7. But if say they get 7 teams in, I think 4 or 5 of them will win the first game, and then after that it gets kind of it's harder and harder to predict. But I would be kind of foolish to put 4 Big 12 teams in the Sweet 16, 25%. But it would not surprise me as much as it would most years that, half the teams that get in from your league also go to the second week, because this is such a good and deep and tough league that, if they get the right matchups, I mean, there's, there are 3 teams, I'm pretty particularly enthralled with when it comes to how you could just blow out a team from the middle part of the Pac-12 or the ACC this year. Texas, Baylor, and Kansas, if they got the right matchup from the ACC, dear God, I mean, it would be bad. Yeah. But, we'll see.
I also think that Iowa State and TCU are both dangerous because the abilities, although last night you heard in the broadcast that TCU doesn't shoot the 3 very well, but they are explosive as they could possibly be. And we know Iowa State, they play in Austin tonight, as I mentioned, against Texas. Now, right before the show began, Paul saw this as well. John Wilner, San Jose Mercury News, he has the Wilner Hotline, covers the Pac-12. Washington State's President Kirk Schultz on the Pac-12 and the timeline and what's going to happen. My sense is we, as a conference, need to get it done discussing the television deal in mid-March, hopefully. The longer it goes, the more noise there will be. I thought people would see it at the same thing as a head coach as far as the statement about damned if you do, damned if you don't, with the statement they released last week. He did say that at least we had to let people know that 10 Pac-12 schools were committed to staying together. It's really one of the first times a president, Craig, of the Pac-12 has come out and said anything. This was the week after the statement, as there is hey, what the heck is going on? How much longer can you wait? And what is everybody like inside the Pac-12?
I mean, yeah, I guess it's good to have some clarity there. Doesn't change my thoughts at all, which is this entire time that the Pac-12 is going to get a TV deal, and it's going to be slightly more than the Big 12s, or it's going to be something we point and make fun of because it will be the lowest amongst the Power Fives, most likely. Whichever, I've seen the cheerleading of, I've actually just seen Pac-12 fans like, I don't care what the TV deal is, just be more than the Big 12, like that kind of stuff. And I'm just curious to see it now. Like, I mean, I'm not involved in all of the mudslinging back and forth. It's somewhat entertaining. It's after a while, like just kind of the same old thing to where you wish there was a piece of news to actually chew on that's like a bit more worthwhile, that's like really something to go off of. And I don't know that that's that. I mean, that's just more of like, hey, it's coming. But I guess it's good to hear that, there's somebody involved that's, saying everybody's going to stick together and we're all going to be here. It kind of confirms what I thought. I'm sure that won't quiet everybody who feels like it's just a matter of time until it all breaks apart and teams go left and right and some join the Big 12 and all that. But I still I don't expect that. I could be totally wrong, and that's fine. I'm not part of negotiations, so it's just a shot in the dark. But it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me unless that TV deal is just that, unimpressive, which it could be. I mean, I don't know, but even still, I mean, it would have to be, I think, pretty dramatically lower than everybody else to cause, the big movers and shakers involved to start ringing other phone lines. But, it might be just satisfactory enough for right now that it bridges this gap till, the 2030s, and we really start to dig into what the huge transformation could further look like. But, yeah, I mean, that's good news for the Pac-12 on the surface. I would imagine we hear about SMU and San Diego State sooner rather than later. That seems like it's all but a done deal. And, go from there. But we got to figure out what this TV deal is, because without that, without those numbers to compare, everybody's just yelling stuff. Yeah. And there's, like, nothing even happening. It's just yelling, and everything is the exact same as it was a month ago,
Yeah.
if not longer than that.
The only thing different is the fact that Kliavkoff publicly was on the campus at SMU,
right?
Visiting the campus and touring the campus. And even then, there are some that question about why would you have done that? It's his conference, or he's representing the conference, but he did. And perhaps that was just to kind of calm the waters, or even say, hey, we're fine, we're adding. And people can sit there and debate that for as long as they want.
Well, and look, Kirk Schultz did say, like, if, he thinks they'll get done by March. If they don't get it done by mid-March, then the noise will get louder. What I think he's kind of intimating that is, yes, the noise outside the conference will certainly get louder, but if they don't get the thing done by mid-March, then you'd have to think that there's some dissension that they don't know about in the ranks. Because you're getting to that point where you're looking at maybe this is going to drift into April and so on, then I'm not saying that I'm not saying that there's dissension, right, public dissension right now, but if it drags past that point, I would start to think if I'm some of the other member schools, is there something going on that these other schools haven't told us about, because we've been down this road a year ago and change with USC and UCLA, and is there something we don't know that we're going to have to ask, like, okay, cards on the table, everybody, why are we mad about this? Like, why are we not signing this deal so we can move on? Because then that's going to be the point where you would find out if somebody's like, yes, okay, we're out, but yeah. I don't think that's because I don't think that there's options for everyone yet that they want to investigate. I think that in particular for most of the schools right now, and this is not, I'm not trying to knock the Big 12 or anything, but the Big 12 is the option if it falls apart, but they don't, that's nobody's first choice. Nobody's first choice is we would like to go to the Big 12.
Among any of them.
And among any of them. No, so
RH5 asked this, is there any meaning that the statement is coming from the Washington State president, because Washington State is thought to be one of those most likely left out or left behind? I don't know if there has to be a pecking order that Washington State's president, he might have just been honest. He might have been answering a question. He was answering a question with John Wilner and what he does with the hotline that covers the Pac-12. I'm not sure if it needed to be Oregon or Washington, if it would have made a difference, or Arizona or Colorado or Utah. I don't know that, but I appreciate the question. and asking that on the chat room today.
Well, I'll put it this way. They're not somebody that the Pac-12's like worrying about if they were to leave it, everything falls apart. I don't think that they're their main concern. I also don't think that they're probably the top target for the Big 12 in any way, shape, or form. So they're pretty much in the territory of they better hope the Pac-12 survives because they are Washington State, one of the first schools that would be on the chopping block. Just based on all the, numbers from certain people that were put out and just all the different things, like just location. I mean, where are they without the Pac-12? I mean, they would fit in, I think, almost culturally probably really well with the Big 12, like sort of farm area and like that kind of whole mentality. But I don't know that they're somebody that's being chased after or is like a big threat to. If you don't get this TV deal done, we're out of here. They're not swinging big weight like that. So
I do think that there are, if we remember all the things we've covered the last 2.5 years, and especially since Texas and OU, and then USC, UCLA, there are some really good numbers for Washington State when it comes to ratings and numbers and viewership and eyeballs. But yeah, I don't know where the pecking order would be among the 8. But Kirk Schultz has also been in the Big 12. And so
he was
him
there
saying
when it fell apart.
Yeah, and so him saying that to me, whether it would have been Arizona or them at Washington State or Oregon State or who, I don't know if that makes a difference.
I do think it would behoove him, maybe not this statement, but the next time if it does go down the dark path with the Big 12, if he came out and said, listen, man, I've been through this before. This is feeling really familiar. I might have already behooved him to say it, but if it got down that path, he's the one of the Pac-12 presidents I'd maybe want to hear from. He's like, look, this feels really, really eerily familiar, and I just want to put a kibosh on it right now. Let's get together and do this because, again, especially for his school, it would be important to do that.
All right, when we come back, King McClure, former Baylor guard, part of ESPN, covers college basketball. His thoughts about the Big 12, Baylor, K-State tonight, Iowa State, Texas tonight, very much the ramifications of competing to still have a chance of the Big 12, piece of the Big 12 championship in the regular season, or just trying to add as many quad one wins, etc., along the way. And a couple other notes later on today, the American Conference released their 23 football schedule, the 6 new schools. We'll get to that. And Baylor has an assistant with Central Texas ties who played high school football in this area. This is 365 Sports. Pioneer Steel and Pipe, a new facility more than twice the size of their old one, and the old one has been in business or had to open the doors in 1943. They have new inventory, higher quantities of inventory, a much more organized fashion when it has to what they have as far as product. In addition, standard long lengths and tubing, angles, channels, rods, and flat. They carry several shorter, more convenient lengths of material, already cut, saving time for you, anyone who doesn't need or can't haul the longer lengths. 2,500 square foot showroom with 1,000 new products in stock, new welding supplies, hardware, do-it-yourself components for the weekend warrior for any project you may have, and also for the professional contractor. Pioneer Steel and Pipe, Pioneer Boys since 1943, pioneerboys.com.
Hey, this is Bryce Petty, former starting quarterback and 2-time Big 12 champion, and I know firsthand the importance of being in top shape both on and off the field. So listen up, men. If you're feeling beat down day in and day out and looking for that high-performance edge that separates the men from the boys, then look no further than the Petty Clinic Low T in Waco. Petty Clinic is a comprehensive men's healthcare clinic with an atmosphere catering to men. Board-certified Dr. Kent Petty has a special interest in offering the highest quality medical care to men of all ages. Some of the services offered include screening and treatment for low testosterone or thyroid, infertility, high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, sleep apnea, while offering comprehensive wellness exams and complete men's health lab panels. High performance men, remember, it's not just a Petty thing. This is Bryce Petty, encouraging you to reach out and Google search Petty Clinic Low T or go to pettycliniclowt.com and get your complimentary lab screening today.
Riverbend Liquor and Wine, Lakeshore Drive, North 19th Street, right behind the bank, is a hidden gem in Waco. If you're a fan of bourbon, especially local Texas bourbons, that's where you gotta go. Balcones, TX, Devil's River, whatever it is, they've got it. Riverbend Liquor and Wine, plus the best selection of craft beers in Waco, seasonally churned out throughout the year, whether it's spring, summer, fall, or winter. Riverbend Liquor and Wine, best selection of craft beers, a speedy drive-through window, and excellent customer service. Find out more on Instagram or just go by and see them. Lakeshore Drive at North 19th Street behind the bank.
Waco Custom Marketplace is your hometown grocery store with a full-service butcher shop and bakery. Hi, this is David Smoak. The butcher shop can take your customized orders for seafood, pork, and poultry and custom cut your favorite steaks from bacon-wrapped fillets to T-bone to bone-in ribeyes. Cut specifically the way you want. They have Norwegian salmon fillets, catfish fillets, sliced ham or turkey and lunch meat, variety of cheese available, and several options of sausage links. Fresh chicken breast or whole chickens, sliced bacon, pork chops, ground beef, marinated beef, and chicken fajitas, and always large briskets available, plus fresh vegetables. So the great product, customer service, and family tradition of the Bauer family continues at Waco Custom Marketplace, open Monday through Saturday. A full-service butcher shop and bakery available. Waco Custom Marketplace, 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco, or WacoCustomMarketplace.com.
Camille Johnson Realtors guide you seamlessly through the process of buying your dream home or selling your current one. Commercial, farm and ranch, or residential, Camille Johnson Realtors can smoothly and successfully lead you through any transaction. With a team of 28 experienced agents who are excited about serving you, Camille Johnson Realtors services the entire greater Waco area. If you're in the market to buy or sell, contact Camille Johnson Realtors, 104 Midway Center in Woodway, or find them online at www.camillejohnson.com. Camille Johnson Realtors, elegant, charming, warm. Welcome home.
This is 365 Sports.
The 3 o'clock hour is sponsored by Waco Custom Marketplace. Meats, sweets, Texas treats, and a cut above the rest. 425 Lake Air Drive, Waco.
He played basketball at Baylor. He covers college basketball, and he has done a great job since getting involved, and Paul helped kind of get him involved in doing some practice work as an analyst and doing podcasts. King McClure joins us from ESPN on 365 Sports. King, we've missed you, man. Great to have you on. You're so popular. You're really busy these days. So how does Baylor clear Saturday night second half in time 2 days later for Kansas State tonight?
Yeah, man. First off, thank you for having me. Secondly, I think it just comes down to what Coach Drew would always stress. So when I was there, every single game, no matter if you win a big game, you lose a big game, no matter what happens, it's almost that phrase, short-term memory loss. So it's one game at a time, and as we know, the Big 12 is a grind. I mean, there's no easy game. So, yeah, you had a bad second half against Kansas, but Coach Drew is emphasizing that you have to be able to take that off and bounce back, because if you allow that to affect you moving forward, then you will lose again to K-State, and then that's 2 losses back-to-back, and you can't afford that. It's too late in the season, and this is the time to gain momentum instead of losing it.
Is it kind of fortunate? I don't know. It might be unfortunate, too, because they're playing the guy who knows them best, but is it fortunate that they have Coach Tang tonight in that one, it's one they got to get back from earlier in the year. They know him. There's all that kind of, even though it won't be like it was here in Waco, that emotion in there, and they can easily focus. It's not, Oklahoma again right after?
Yeah. I mean, this time around, yeah, it's Coach Tang, and like the first time, all the welcoming back and just all the pleasantries and everything. It was him coming back to Waco for the first time. Now it's business. I mean, you beat Coach Tang in Kansas State, beat you at your home court. So now it's time for revenge. I mean, yeah, that buddy is all good, but right now Coach Drew and the staff and all the players, I know that they're thinking, like, we can't lose again to him. We're not going to get swept. So now it's time to handle business and get a dub.
King, first time being able to ask you this since it has been a while since we've talked to you, but what have been your impressions of Keontae George? Obviously came in with a lot of hype months ago, one-and-done type of a guy, and obviously not a perfectly polished player just yet because he's still so young. But what have you thought of what you've seen so far?
Yeah, I've been really impressed. What I've been most impressed with is he just has a knack for scoring the basketball. He's an elite scorer. He's an NBA-level scorer. Some of the shots that he takes, that he makes, they're pro shots. So we know that he can do that. And early on in the season, he was a really good passer. I mean, as time kind of evolved, he's been focusing more on scoring than really passing and facilitating. But he has that vision, and he can play more of a combo, like point sometimes every now and then, backup point, starting two guards. But he's an elite level scorer. I mean, everything that we knew coming in, he lived up to the expectation, lived up to the hype. And frankly, if it wasn't for Brandon Miller, I think that Keontae George might be the most impressive freshman in the country right now.
Well, I don't know if you heard about this, but we just had the story about Brandon Miller. Apparently is the one that brought the gun to that shooting in Tuscaloosa that involved the former player. And I don't know. Like, I'll ask you this. And programs have had their times, and Baylor, of course, has had their dark clouds. But how does outside noise on something like this, how does it disrupt, or how do you try to keep it from being a distraction, King?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where player-led teams, they're so pivotal in this moment. And honestly, the coach being able to, bring in the reins on this, because a lot of times, when they dealt with what they dealt with, that type of circumstance, I've never dealt with that. I've dealt with other things, but not to that level, not to that magnitude. But the biggest thing for me personally as a player would be, okay, like team meeting, like whatever goes on in this locker room, whatever we talk about first, we have to get out this locker room, and how we're going to handle this, like this is how we're going to do it as a team. I mean, we're going to do this, we're going to stick together. We're not going to allow this to distract us. We're going to focus on our next game. Whatever consequences happen, but we have to handle business. Every single time we step on the court, we have to stay focused. I mean, whatever player is dealing with something, okay, I get you dealing with something, but when you're on the court, let's lock in for at least this hour and a half or this 2-hour game, and then off the court, we'll try to deal with it together. So I was really big on, being a family. I mean, everybody talks about being a family, but I was really big on that. Like, whatever you deal with off the court, we can get through it together. And it's honestly easier if you have your brothers with you.
King, Baylor's surprisingly, I think to a lot of people, not great on defense this year. They're good enough most days, but that game against Kansas kind of showed some of their flaws. They are much more of an offensive-driven team this year. How do they get better enough to make that deep run right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the phrase, how do they get better? I mean, the season's almost over with. Yeah. So I think who they are and what they have done to this point is who they're going to be. So I don't know if there's that much room to get better on the defensive side. I think adding Jonathan Trauma-Trachua is a major help, and I think that will help them become a better defensive team. I still don't think that they're at the levels of being elite like they once were, but I think that it helps with him back on the floor. I mean, his presence, his talking, his energy just helps so much. Now, the biggest thing for Baylor is they have to just make shots. If they aren't making shots, it's going to be a rough night for them because they are heavily offensive driven. I mean, that's just who they are. The three guards, they live and die by the three. They're great on the offensive side, but the offense has to be clicking every night in order for them to be successful.
What was that like to see every day John come back from your point of view?
Man, it was a great thing to see. I got to see how hard he was working during the off season when I would come down there and work out with him. Just saw how much he wanted to be out there. Every single time I would go up there, he was in the gym lifting, working, putting up shots, whether he was sitting in a chair or he was just doing spot shots without even jumping, just shooting free throws or something. You could just tell how much he wanted. And, a kid like that just really respects the game and brings that type of energy that you need. I mean, the energy that he plays with is infectious. And you can tell when you watch it on the TV screen what he brings every single time he steps on the court. So to see a guy like that get injured, and then for him to make this return and still bring that same level, you just have to respect it. And I was overjoyed for him to be able to finally do what he loves again.
He is one of the nicest, sweetest individuals you're ever going to meet, but are the guys on the team a little bit scared of him because of, like, he's going to outwork you? No matter, like, if you're in the gym and, you know, kind of half-assing it and he's there on one leg shooting free throws for 3 hours, does that kind of make you like, I better pick it up?
Yeah, no, for sure. It definitely makes you pick it up. And if seeing that does not motivate you as a player, then you're playing the wrong sport and you're at the wrong school. So seeing John work every single day should honestly motivate and inspire the players and make them want to be better, because you have to live up to the standard of excellence that he brings. I mean, even when you see the way that he plays the game, how hard he plays every single time, that should make you want to match his energy. And sometimes you see it that it does, sometimes you see that it doesn't. But he's one of those guys that he leads by example. I mean, he's vocal every now and then, but he's definitely a leader by example.
King McClure, former Baylor guard, ESPN basketball analyst with us on 365 Sports. King, a defense is a commitment, right? Isn't that something either you have that in your head or you don't?
Yeah, for sure. I think defense is just a matter of effort and want to. That's the biggest thing. I mean, when I was coming up my freshman year, I remember Coach Mills used to point me out in the film session and tell me that I couldn't guard a soul. And I basically talked about how bad of a defensive player I was. So for me, it wasn't a matter of working. I mean, yeah, I did a few things like defensive slides, and I did a few things to like really help as far as like getting in the weight room with Charlie. But the biggest thing for me is like, okay, I want to guard. And the reason why I want to guard is because I'm tired of Coach Mills. I'm tired of Coach Tang. I'm tired of all the coaches, Coach Drew, constantly bragging on my defense and telling me that I can't guard. So my senior season, I finally got to a place where I was an elite defender and I could really, really guard because I wanted to, and because I was tired of all the coaches telling me that I couldn't do it. So, yeah, I think that defense is really a want-to type of thing.
King, this league is really deep and really good, and we talk about it all the time. How deep of a run or how many teams do you think could make a serious deep run out of this Big 12?
Oh, man. It's crazy because I think this is the first year where I just have no idea who I think will win the tournament. I mean, normally you always have a solid four who you can bet money on will be in the Final Four. And then you might have one or two just dark horses. But this year, I think there's a solid about 10 to 12 teams who could go to the Final Four and really win a championship. I mean, you look at Kansas, the way that they're playing right now, they're playing at an extremely high level. I mean, Kansas for sure. Baylor, I think, has a great chance. Guards win games in the tournament, and Baylor has 3 of them that are just as good as anybody in America. I even think Iowa State, when they're making shots, they're hard to beat. The way they defend, and when they're on, when Kausher and Caleb Grill are knocking down threes and Lipsy is able to get into you and cause havoc and really find his teammates, I think they're hard to beat too. So I think that they can make a run. K-State, I feel like they've almost hit a wall in a sense. They kind of struggled here of late. But I think that if Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson can find their rhythm like they did early on in the season, I think they could possibly do it. Texas is a team who, Tyrese Hunter, I forgot the two guards' name.
Guard?
What is
Carr?
Oh, Marcus Carr. Yeah, Marcus Carr. Marcus Carr is a guy who is a high-volume guy. But when the ball is rolling, I mean, you've seen him this year drop 40. So he can score. They can fill it up. Timmy Allen is just as good as well. I think Texas. I think there's legit 4 teams in this league: Baylor, Texas, Kansas, and Iowa State, who can make a deep tournament run.
How impressed have you been by Rodney Terry, the job he did to make sure the ship stayed upright and moved on along there in Austin?
Yeah, man. You talk about being able to withstand outside noises. Mm-hmm. That right there is a perfect example, and I've been extremely impressed. I feel like there's 2 ways to look at this. You can look at it as, well, the players were already there and they were good enough. So that's why they're having the success. He didn't have to do much, but he's already just coaching good players. But I look at it from more of, okay, keeping these players motivated, keeping these players focused, that's not an easy thing to do, especially when the guy that they came there to play for has and leaves and is no longer there. So now all of a sudden, a lot of guys, the first thing they're thinking is, oh, where am I going to go to school next year? Especially with the new transfer rule. Where can I go make this money with the new NIL rule? So I think he's done a tremendous job being able to keep those guys locked in and still be able to compete. And honestly, they're fighting for the Big 12 championship now.
King McClure with us, ESPN analyst. Baylor, Kansas State tonight. Texas host Iowa State tonight, and a couple of really important games. Obviously, Texas Tech and Oklahoma think their game's important too. King, thank you for your time. Great to have you on. Continue the best to you and your TV career.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me anytime.
That's King McClure with us on 365 Sports. When we come back, a couple of notes. Jamie Pollard will join us at the top of the hour. A new name for the Baylor coaching staff, an assistant offensive line coach. A little nugget about the AAC releasing their 23 schedule. That and more. This is 365 Sports. Here on the desk here at the studio, the Cigar Aficionado. It's a magazine. The Fox NFL Sunday Dream Team is on the cover as they each have, well, Jimmy Johnson or Howie Long don't. Neither does Kurt Menefee, but a cigar that they're promoting that might be one of the best in the world. For example, Padron 1964 is the number one cigar from 2021. Maybe the one you like. It's not even rated, but if you like it, that's all that matters. And inside, Don Humidor and Coffee Beans in their 48-foot walk-in humidor are cigars with all of the elite brands. I mentioned the one with Padron, or there's Cohiba, there's Macanudo, and there's also many more, Romeo and Julieta, and if you like, Arturo Fuente, Rocky Patel. On top of that, they have all of what you need, including the humidor to put the cigars in to keep them where they need to be humidified, and the cutter to cut the end of the cigar, the torch lighter to light the cigar, unless you want to use old-fashioned way like with matches. And they have Vita Dreams. It's a CBD product. You take one, you kind of learn along the way. Do you want to bite an entire gummy? It's just like what you'd see in any kind of a package of candy, but it's CBD product. They take it and they have it there at Don Humidor for you to try to get to sleep more comfortably and not waste 30 minutes or more or an hour or even longer because you have so much on your mind. Get the best sleep every night. Don Humidor and Coffee Bean with Carol, Ashley, and Cheyenne. Tell them I sent you in the Town West Shopping Center off Valley Mills in Waco.
Kick off 2023 with a bang at Allen Samuels in Waco. During the President's Day sales event, get a 2023 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo with total values up to $2,000 and 1.9% for 72 months on second and third row options. That's right, 1.9% for 72 months plus rebates. Or how about the 2023 Jeep Gladiator Sport with up to $3,500 in total values plus an extra $500 to first responders at Allen Samuels in Waco.
Three Nations Brewing Company has 16 different beers on draft with a new beer every Friday. It also offers 2 air-conditioned tap rooms, a large indoor beer hall, a second-floor mezzanine offering a great overview of the brewing company and equipment and patio where you can relax under the shade. Plus, you can now experience the new Three Nations Beer Garden Grill on our shaded patio. Grab a cold beer and enjoy a bite from our freshly prepared and delicious menu. Street tacos, quesadillas, freshly cooked burgers and dogs, and veggie burgers too. Nachos and so much more, all prepared and cooked on site. So come visit the award-winning Three Nations Brewing Company on East Vandergrift off I-35 in Carrollton.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be part of the Waco community. We're a small family business here in Central Texas. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important. And unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. And that's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through this difficult time. So if you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. You can schedule online in minutes at idealmri.com or call 833-IDEAL-MRI.
It takes time to reach goals. It's a truth that applies to more than sports. It goes for your financial goals as well. You work hard for your money, and you deserve an investment strategy that lines up with your game plan. And Chuck Verno, your Edward Jones financial advisor, can help. If financial investments aren't putting forth the effort you desire, stop by today for a financial review. Chuck Verno, 720 North 64th Street in Waco, 254-732-1161. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
Automatic Chef Canteen is a full-service micro-market vending and office coffee provider with state-of-the-art vending equipment, a wide variety of products, and offering custom-fitted micro-market vending office coffee solutions for your employee break room. You want a full break room solution and a workplace oasis? Well, Automatic Chef Canteen, locally owned and operated for over 50 years in Central Texas, also includes in-house mechanics on call 24/7 for fast, reliable service and maintenance. Automatic Chef Canteen, 6900 Imperial Drive in Waco, or online at automaticchefcanteen.com.
TFNB Your Bank for Life is the official local bank of Baylor Athletics. Find out why more Central Texas are making TFNB their bank for life. Sign up for our Edge checking and savings accounts to earn interest or cash back. With 5 convenient locations and an award-winning mobile app, banking has never been easier. TFNB Your Bank for Life. Member FDIC.
This is 365 Sports. Text us at 254-339-1122. The text line is sponsored by Riverbend's Liquor and Wine, with the most extensive variety of craft beer in Waco. A hidden gem on Lakeshore Drive and 19th Street.
Baylor has an offensive line coach added to Eric Mateos being the offensive line coach. They have Craig Watts, who played high school football at Catalina High School. Last night on his Twitter feed, put it up that he's the assistant offensive line coach. He played in the NFL for a bit with the Chargers and also with the Jets. Played college football at West Texas A&M. He was recently on the staff at Colorado State as a graduate assistant. Very young, but now joins the Baylor staff as an assistant offensive line coach. Also, thanks to Aaron Wilson and Retired Stockbroker for their super chat. Thank you very much. Aaron Wilson said, hey, I wish you guys could have your show or teach others to do the show like you do in other markets. And, of course, he is from Lubbock. They have some really good people that cover Texas Tech up in Lubbock.
But we're happy to do it. We have a nice consulting fee. We'll come on out there and show you what we do.
Paid by the hour. Mm-hmm. And we could do it. And believe me, you have to still have the same type of owners that we do to make sure you're committed to doing it right. The American Athletic Conference today released their 2023 football schedule, 6 new teams. And they'll play 8 conference games in a single division format, which most people are going to that, not the East-West or whatever it might be. Charlotte, Florida, Atlantic, North Texas, Rice, UAB, and UTSA all officially join July the 1st as they move from Conference USA, completed at about the same time the AAC members head towards the Big 12 and UCF Houston and Cincinnati. Tulane opens up 4 of their first 5 games at home. 4 of their first 5 games at home. Then it'll open up on September 2nd at home against South Alabama. Then host Mississippi the next week, which will be a fun game down in New Orleans.
Yeah, that'd be fun. That'll be rowdy. Lane Kiffin at Tulane and New Orleans. I'm gonna have to put that one on the calendar. Remember that's happening.
September 2nd. Not sure what time, but that. Also, Navy among the 8 remaining AAC schools will open its year on September 26th against Notre Dame in Dublin, Ireland, which last year that was the Northwestern-Nebraska game that opened up the season. That began the downfall, if it already hadn't started, for former Huskers quarterback and head coach Scott Frost. So there's that with the AAC. We're going to hear from Iowa State Director of Athletics Jamie Pollard here momentarily. And we are on tonight until 6 o'clock. Don't forget, tonight at 10:30, we'll have the show. Emery will condense everything at 10:30 on the CW. Had a question about Mac Rhodes today. He'll join us Friday at 5, not today, because of some travel that he's involved with. Tomorrow, Oklahoma State Director of Athletics Chad Weiberg will join us at 5 o'clock here on the show. So we'll have 3 ADs, and I think pretty much almost every AD from the conference, once we have Chad Weiberg tomorrow, has joined us on the show at some particular point. Also, I mentioned that tonight, Baylor at Kansas State. That game is a tip-off, and it's on ESPN2, 6 o'clock tip. Texas Tech, Oklahoma, ESPN2 at 8 following that one. And then Iowa State, Texas, that game is on the Longhorn Network. Speaking of which, Jamie Pollard, Director of Athletics at Iowa State, joins us on 365 Sports. Jamie, what is the reaction, if you don't mind, when your games that you have it's in Austin, but they're on the Longhorn Network? Is that kind of annoying or just kind of the way the schedule plays out?
Can't leave soon enough.
Oh, my Lord. I didn't know how you were going to react to that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's discuss that. And thank you for your time, by the way. Tomorrow, Chad Weiberg's going to join us. We had Gene Taylor last week. What does just getting the exit agreement finalized mean for everybody else that will be remaining among the Big 12?
Well, it just, to get it finalized just allows us to move forward and be a lot more productive. Quite frankly, having that hanging out there, you had to do double of everything. 14-game schedule, a 12-game schedule. A 14-team, a 12-team. And you do that through all the sports. And so it caused a lot of extra work. And so now just having that finalized is just nice. We can put it behind us. We can start, having the more streamlined meetings where you don't feel like you got to say, okay, for this part of the meeting, the two of you need to leave the room. And I think it just allows us to really start to coalesce around, the 12 with the 4 new coming on board and developing those relationships and starting to develop some rivalry.
How strange is it, and I've asked a couple different athletic directors this, based on your years of doing this, to have a schedule this year that you will not have coming back around? This schedule has nothing to do with next year. You don't have to, okay, well, we went to their place and they've got to come to ours and just have a 1 year. Is it kind of like the COVID year plus more games? What's that like?
I'm not even giving it a second thought. So to us, it's a non-issue. It's just that's our schedule this year, and we'll get another schedule for the following year. So haven't spent any time thinking or worrying about that.
Your basketball team, I know they didn't win Saturday. Heck of a game in Manhattan. They're really good, very explosive. Your thoughts about what you see from them? Obviously, the game tonight in Austin against UT.
Well, our league, and everybody's saying it. I'm on the basketball committee, so I know it. This is unprecedented. The fact that the committee had 5 teams in the top 12 on Saturday. It's never happened before. There's been 5 teams in the top 16, but never 5 teams in the top 12. And quite frankly, you can make the case that, well, drop Texas and add Houston, and then we had 2 teams in the Final Four, the top 4 teams. And so to have 3 of our teams, Baylor, Texas, and Kansas in the top 7, it's phenomenal. And so, I'm very excited about where Iowa State is. The fact that we were 11th in that overall selection ranking, it's not what anybody anticipated we'd have this year. So in a lot of ways, we're playing on house money. Yet I want to see us finish it the right way because I think we've got the potential to, really do well come the NCAA tournament time.
Jamie, you've seen comments from Brett Yormark about, basketball being undervalued and seen comments about that elsewhere. A lot of times with just, whether it be TV deals or the money flowing, there's a lot of focus on football and then to a lesser extent, men's basketball. How much of a diamond in the rough do you feel like that is potentially, and how much does that basketball potential excite you guys about the future of the conference and what the image and identity will be part of?
Well, if it's correct, if he's right, there's a huge opportunity for us. Time will tell, but we're going to do things to position ourselves in a way to test that market when the time comes with the next television deal 5 years or 6 years from now. What we've got to do as the schools is we've got to continue to be smart about scheduling, continue to be intentional and deliberate about our investments in basketball and our decision making, and continue to make sure we keep this spot. I mean, we're hands down the best league in the country at least 3 years running, and we need to make sure we protect that position. And so we've got to do things. You know, even with 12 teams, we're not going to get to play everybody twice going forward. And that in itself is going to weaken our net rankings. And so we've got to be very deliberate and intentional about the moves we make to make sure we protect that, because it is, even if it doesn't materialize into more money in the television in the future, it's a battle cry that is really important for our league's brand.
So does that mean that you'll have to schedule even more tough non-conference games? I mean, not that you guys aren't already doing it and playing in the best tournaments, but maybe one or two more of those just to help your net ranking, like you said?
I don't know if I want to go there yet. Mm-hmm. I don't think we can let our guard down and just say, hey, we're the best league, and if we just keep doing what we're doing. The recipe is going to get tweaked a little. And not because Texas and Oklahoma are leaving, because you can make the case that Houston's going to actually strengthen it. But, you know, you've always had Kansas, you've always had Baylor, you know, you've always had the good teams on your schedule twice. And mathematically, that can't happen going forward. One of the things that the committee has really valued about the Big 12 is we played everybody twice. With only 10 of us, there really hasn't been a bottom. We've proven it this year, the way Oklahoma and Texas Tech have played when they've taken turns being, quote, at the bottom of the standings, where some other leagues, you know, they're clearly nights off when you play the bottom of the league. There's no night off in the Big 12. So I think we just have to be careful, because as we move forward, that recipe is getting tweaked. And it's going to change, but I'm not certain how we adapt to that change. And that's what I mean. I think we got to be smart and pay attention and be deliberate and intentional about our next move.
Jamie, one of your responses to when Craig was bringing up the possibility of Gonzaga or whatever else is in the future when it comes to basketball, you said about Brett Yormark bringing that up, is if he's right. Isn't that part of what he brings to the table, that it's some new vision that is allowing the conference to look elsewhere for revenue?
Absolutely. You know, and so I'm not saying it to disagree with the commissioner. What I'm just saying is, you know, we won't know the ultimate answer to that question, right, until you go back to the marketplace. And so if he's right, if he's correct, and there is a market to split apart basketball from football and, you know, in theory, have somebody else be the either compete, make the current entity have to compete to have the basketball, or maybe another entity values basketball more than who the current parties are. But we're not going to know that really, you know, until we get back into the marketplace. But, you know, one of the strategic things I think commissioner has brought to the table is the current contract didn't allow us to pull those apart. Mm-hmm. And so we're putting in provisions in the next contract to make sure that we have the ability, if we so desire, to pull it apart, that we can.
You, by the way, and for those, you mentioned this earlier, a part of the NCAA Men's Basketball Committee in the fourth year of a 5-year term. Jamie, what's that like? We see where football is so the way they select whoever's going to play for the national title or the semifinals, and that's about to go even expand further. It just seems like there's this angst every week when they have that show, whatever they do to try to market what's happening in college football. To be a part of the Men's Basketball Committee, is it maybe not as much? Is it stressful or is it fun? How would you describe that?
Well, it's certainly fun. And, you know, it's a lot of work, a ton of work. And, you know, my colleagues that have been on the CFP committee, Joe Castiglione's been on both. And he can speak factually from both sides. And he would say the CFP committee is a walk in the park, because one, you don't have to do it all year long. And number two, you're really only having to deal with a few teams, where in the NCAA basketball committee, you're dealing with a lot of teams and a lot of different scenarios. So it is a ton of work, but it's a lot of fun. And it's been really educational, both professionally. You know, I know the model that TJ and I are using scheduling-wise for Iowa State is founded a lot on what I've learned by being in that room. But it's also been educational on a personal level. Is, I'm like 99.9% of the other people prior to being on the committee. I assume the committee, had all this clandestine approach to how they get matchups and who plays where. And that I can tell you unequivocally doesn't even happen. Not even 1 ounce of our time is spent on that. Quite frankly, on Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock, once we have the teams finally in the final order of 1 to 68, the computer creates the brackets. We don't. So when people try to say the committee has orchestrated somebody to play somebody somewhere, I can assure you without a doubt that it did not happen.
Jamie Pollard, Director of Athletics at Iowa State, with us on 365 Sports.
That actually makes it seem that much cooler to me that you would just be sitting in the room like us, like, oh my God, they're going to play here and they could play. Man, that does seem like it's pretty fun. Do you, when you look at how you guys used to schedule or how they used to schedule and how they do now with the quads and the different ways they're ranking, is it simpler now than it used to be, or is it more complex because there's more information?
Well, so you're talking from an individual school about how we schedule our games?
No, about picking the tournament.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, quite honestly, guys, I have no idea how they did it in the yesteryears where they didn't have a computer to do it. Because with all the rules about, if you play somebody 3 times, you can't play them before, the round of the round of 8. If you play somebody twice, you can play them in the round of 16, but not before. If you play somebody once, you can't play them in the first round. You get to go with the top 16 schools, go to the closest site, and all of those factors. BYU can't play on Sundays, and I don't know how they ever kept track of all that. We have it built into the computer program, so you just put in the teams from 1 to 68, and the computer spits out the bracket that works for that. Now on Sunday, typically because you have 3 or 4 games that still have to be played out, the Big Ten, the American, I think the Ivy League, trying to think there's another league in there. So you'll have contingency brackets. So last year on Sunday at like 1 o'clock, there were 10 different possible brackets depending on what happened later in the day in those conference tournament games. So how they did that before, I don't know. There was probably errors made because I don't know how you would keep track of all that. But, the computer does it for us.
Jamie, the background you had, you were a CPA at Arthur Anderson Company in Milwaukee. How much did that time for a couple of years in that business help you run an athletic department?
That's a great question. You're going back in yesteryears for me. One of the things I always like to share with our folks about that is, I was in what they called entrepreneurial services, which meant privately held companies. And so you met a lot with the owners. You walked their plants, you saw their inventory, you did their tax returns. And back then, I didn't understand what I didn't know, right? Like all of us when you're younger. But when I fast forward to today, I think back to those days, and when I'm dealing with donors today, those donors are those same people, owners of companies, family businesses, great pride in their, and so I have a perspective of being able to ask questions and engage with people that I wouldn't have had if I wouldn't have had that foundation 30 years ago of being in some of those situations where I got exposed to those challenges that people have and the way people think about their giving and their business and their legacy. And so I think that part of it's been really helpful to me.
Jamie, again, with us on 365 Sports. So you mentioned when I asked you at the start about the Longhorn Network, that game tonight. Looking forward, where this place was, this Big 12, 2 summers ago, and where you are now, and the incoming 4, how healthy the conference is, the new deal, maybe even expansion, who knows, or realignment, whatever that would be. How are you at times do you stop and go, man, we really pulled this off when there were thoughts it could be a disaster?
Absolutely. I tell our fans all the time, I'll go back past this. I'll go back to the first time, back when A&M and Nebraska and Colorado, Missouri left. I said Iowa State was dangling over the cliff. So was Baylor. I remember a clandestine meeting that Lou Perkins organized and Baylor was part of that with us, and when we got to the meeting in Kansas City, Baylor wasn't there. And I asked Lou, what happened? Where's Baylor? And he goes, I didn't invite him. And it was like a wake-up call of there's have-nots within the have-nots, right? But I share that with our fan base because that was, I don't know, remember 2010? Mm-hmm. And if you would have told me in 2010 at that particular moment where I was probably hanging over the edge of the cliff with somebody holding on to just one of my ankles, that, hey, 10 years from now, 12 years from now, Iowa State will have had their best last decade of finance, athletics, facilities. They'd be in the best position they've ever been in. I would have thought, like, okay, what are you drinking or smoking? Because you don't know what you're talking about. But that's where we are. And so when Texas and Oklahoma announced they were leaving, what was that, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, whatever it was, that was my message to our fan base is, I know right now you're going, wow, what happened? But I can't tell you that nobody can tell us that 10 years from now we might go, that's the best thing that ever happened to the Big 12 was them leaving. And, here we are a year and a half later, and it's kind of starting to look like that. And so, I'm an optimist, and so I'm going to keep forging forward, and I'm excited where we are. I'm thankful for where we are as a league, and I'm very optimistic about what the future holds for all of us.
If, in fact, that the conference does add, let's say, basketball teams only, not that others may not have other sports, but let's say in the term of Gonzaga, to use them as an example, they don't have football, would there still they wouldn't get a full share, would they? Has that even been discussed that they would get a partial share based on the tournament? How would that work for somebody that doesn't have football when it comes to the media money?
Well, it hasn't been discussed.
Okay.
So I would make the assumption that they would get a prorated share of, based on what they bring to the table. They wouldn't get an equal share because they wouldn't be making the same equal investment that the rest of us are making either. But it hasn't been discussed.
As an AD in the conference that has been rated before in the Big 12 with the latest one, Texas and Oklahoma, you mentioned Nebraska, OU, and of course in between A&M and also Missouri. Do you look at another conference right now that's kind of trying to figure themselves out like the Pac-12 and feel for them? How do you look at what they're dealing with?
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't say I don't feel for them. Many of them are my favorite, some of my best colleagues. Rob Mullins at Oregon, I was his best man in his wedding. So, I don't wish ill will upon anybody, and nor would I want to wish ill will upon us. But at the same time, I'm glad it's them and not us because, it's been us way too many times. And I still have calluses from 2010 and calluses from a year and a half ago. So it's kind of nice for it not to be us. But, at the same time, I've always tried to, live my life holistically and, be careful what you wish upon others because it can turn on you on a dime. And so, keep my head down, keep doing what's best for Iowa State and the Big 12, and, just be grateful that we're blessed to be in the position we're in.
Do ADs from other conferences talk much? Do you guys, like, for example, if someone from that conference was to call you and pick your brain, and you mentioned Rob Mullins or whoever, is that something that happens quite a bit, text messages or phone calls, or is that really not, if there's a convention?
Well, it's human nature. You talk to those that you're the closest to. At the same time, I can only speak for my relationships with the individuals that I have in those situations. And I always try to just be respectful and not want our friendship to become about that issue. So a lot of times I won't even bring it up. I just avoid it just because I, again, go back to a holistic approach to life. If the roles were reversed, I'm not certain I'd always want them asking me those questions. So, I've Dave Hickey, who from Arizona, is on the basketball committee with me, and I spent all week with him last week in Indianapolis. Sat next to him at dinner 2 times. I never asked him one time about it because I just felt like, what I'm not going to ask him. What can he tell me?
Yeah.
Right? Tell me in that setting. So why even ask the question? Don't even infringe upon our friendship. If there was something to be asked that he needed my opinion or my advice, he'd ask.
Are you happy with where the Big 12 is now, or do you feel like because of the unknown that there might need still to be some changes and even additions in the future?
I'm really excited about where we're at, and I look forward to starting life, in that capacity at 12. Could there be other additions? Yeah. I mean, you don't have to look back very long to not realize that could be the case, but I don't live my life thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm embracing the 12 we have, and until the commissioner says, hey, it's going to be different because this is happening or that's happening, I'm not going to spend a lot of time worrying about something I don't have a lot of control over. I don't have the ultimate vote. It'll be my president, and we'll be 1/12 of a vote. And whatever's supposed to be will be. But until that point, I'm going to make the 12 of us the best we can possibly be.
Jamie, you're an inspiration for a lot of people for what you've done in your life, also with what you've battled. But also tell Nick Jost we said hi, great friend of us, and his time at Baylor and now with what he does. We appreciate him. And also thank you, as always, for time on the show today, and good luck coming up tonight in Austin.
Well, thank you very much. And when our men's team is there a week from now, I won't be there because I'll be at the Big 12 wrestling tournament. But tell Coach Drew to go easy on my Cyclones.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate that. I think the Cyclones hammered Scott Drew and company up in Ames to start the conference schedule.
In a week and a half, it's going to be senior day, and Flagler's finally going to be a senior, isn't he? Isn't he finally going to be done? And, all the emotion, and, just remember we still want a good seed, so don't, put, 20 on us or something. I mean, let it be a one-possession game.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate your time. And from the very first thing he said, his transparency and honesty, when we asked him about tonight's game against Texas on the Longhorn Network down in Austin. Good stuff.
Yeah, one of the best ADs in the business, in my opinion, because he has candor that maybe a lot don't. That you heard that. I mean, he just kind of says what he thinks, and he's not afraid. Like in those times with the Big 12, he was the one who's kind of out front saying the things that everybody thinks but is afraid to say. Like he's like, no, I got to say these things out loud. We have to discuss it. We can't just let the fish just swim away. And so I always love having him on the show. He cracks me up.
Yeah, there was a really inopportune or a poorly timed technical glitch that cut out right when he was talking about the meeting that apparently Baylor wasn't invited to.
Yeah, the clandestine, yeah.
I mean, it was just kind of awkward to try and follow back towards that. So
I would bet I know who the other two schools were probably Kansas and Kansas State.
I mean, what did he say, though? The gist of it was
the schools that were going to be left out. Like Baylor was going to be one of those.
The haves of the have-nots, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then there were the have-nots inside the have-nots.
And then Baylor was out of that, too.
And Baylor was out of that, too. So, yeah, because, let's see, those other teams are leaving. Texas was talking to the Pac-12. Tech and Oklahoma State were trying to get on that deal. Oklahoma and A&M A&M was already gone. Oklahoma was trying to figure out what they were doing. So, yeah, it was a mess. But then, Kansas was kind of in that. Well, that was, right about when their football.
Luke Perkins was the AD.
Yeah. So they were right at the beginning of. They'd only been a couple years where football had been bad again because they were, about 4 years out in 2010 of Todd Reesing and all that. So they didn't have the kind of despair that they did until this year with football. But Kansas State was kind of out there like who's gonna take them, and then everybody came through it. Everybody's here, and then moving on again. And it's hard to say that like the Big 12 will be more watched or more known without two gigantic, huge brands in it, but that's not always the best thing, especially if those two brands were unilaterally making decisions and no one could convince them otherwise.
Influencing them, at least. Yeah. By the way, Sandra had the comment about enjoy that smaller check, Jamie. And I had to respond to this, Sandra. And after what I was like in the opening segment, I'm not going to respond the way I did. But one of the things I love about that money argument with fans is how much of that Texas money is going in your bank. It's part of business. Iowa State's fine. They have survived many things before, and they'll survive Texas and Oklahoma moving on to the SEC, and they're doing pretty well when it comes to how much money they're making. Maybe not quite as good as the SEC and Big Ten teams, but they're doing pretty well.
Sounded awfully happy to me, Sandra.
Sure. He sounded incredibly happy, absolutely. All right, when we come back, Couple of notes to get to. Paul has his top 5 in about an hour and 25 minutes. Craig has Off the Radar coming up in about 25 minutes or so. A lot of things to get to. A tragic story out of UNLV today. Phil Venzer, who's one of our great viewers out in Vegas, sent the story to me about their mourning the loss of a football player. We'll have that and more. And this is 365 Sports.
The future's bright. The time is now.
College is what you make it. It's a late-night pizza run and all-nighters coding a new project. It's having big dreams and making them a reality. It's a professor who knows your name and your story. It's preparation for your future, your calling, your life. And at Baylor, it's even more. Baylor, where lights shine bright.
Do you or your kids get nervous about going to the dentist? Stonewood Dental, Dr. Steve Childress, he can help.
I've spent a career taking care of patients who as children had bad experiences, and now they're adults that hate going to the dentist. If I get a kid at 3 years old and they come every 6 months and it's a happy experience, it's normal for them. Now they have an accident at 6 or 7 or 8 at school. Now they have a broken tooth or a trauma, and they have to come here. They're used to lights, they're used to water in their mouth, they're used to experience, they already trust us. It's amazing what we can do with that kid without it being a negative thing. But if I see a 6 or 7 or 8 year old that's never been to the dentist, and now they have a trauma or an unfortunate unexpected toothache, it's harder to do that for that kid and it not be somewhat of a negative experience. So bottom line is I try to teach kids and adults and teenagers and everybody the way I'd want my family treated, which is where it's a necessary part of life. You just take care of it. It doesn't have to be that big a deal.
Learn more, stonewood-dental.com.
In Texas, there's pea-size hail and baseball-size hail. Guess which one hit our house? We didn't even know where to begin, but we called our Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent, and he was so reassuring. He knew exactly what to do to get our house back into shape and our lives back to normal. Now, we're even more thankful for the roof over our heads.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
Boots add protection. Good boots help you climb better and move forward faster. And when your son or daughter steps into the boots of a U.S. Army officer, they also learn how to lead. In these boots, they'll gain more confidence with expert training in one of more than 150 occupational specialties. In these boots, they'll stand a little taller and lead a team with diverse backgrounds and areas of expertise to successfully accomplish whatever challenge comes next. In these boots, they'll earn respect with valuable experience from day one that will give them solid footing for success into the future. Highly qualified candidates who earn a spot on our team can receive comprehensive health care coverage, college tuition assistance, and a bonus of up to $40,000. See all the things your son or daughter can achieve in our boots at GoArmy.com. U.S. Army Waco Recruiting Company, 254-598-8131 or 254-776-1543.
One size fits all. That may be all right for an adjustable belt or cheap sunglasses. When it comes to your financial needs, no one wants a one-size-fits-all strategy. Cam Heathcott, your Edward Jones financial advisor, knows that his most important goals are yours. That's why we take the time to understand your needs, knowing you. That's how Edward Jones makes sense of investing. Cam Heathcott in Conroe at 936-756-7717. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 4 o'clock hour is sponsored by Boozer's Jewelers, the wedding ring store, specializing in custom jewelry and repair, all in-house.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
Thanks to Phil Venzer bringing notice to me to me earlier today from UNLV president. Words are hard to come by this evening as we grieve the sudden and tragic loss of UNLV student athlete Ryan Keeler. My sincere condolences to his family, friends, loved ones, and teammates during this difficult time. Apparently, he was found non-responsive where he was living, and so of course they've started an investigation into what was going on or what happened, but the loss of Ryan Keeler at UNLV. Also, this note, and this has come down in the last just a few minutes, Apple TV, this is Andrew Marchand. Apple TV is emerging as the potential landing spot for the Pac-12 college football rights, with ESPN, Amazon Prime Video, and Fox Sports lukewarm to the league. Apple could end up being the platform for the Pac-12, and you never know because we've never really seen the streaming be the main part of anything. And if this ends up being a bunch of money and Apple goes all in, Apple Plus TV, good for them. At least that is a sign of what might be next.
From what we've been told or what's been reported, that if Amazon is part of this deal and there's a large streaming component, it's not going to be everything. Like ESPN would be the main partner, and ESPN Plus and Amazon would be where most of the Pac-12 stuff goes. I get the feeling that Apple would kind of be an all or nothing deal. They are that's why I thought they were going to get the Sunday ticket, and what kind of held that up was they wanted Apple has so much money. Now Amazon has, this much too, but Apple has so much that they wanted to get the Sunday ticket and just include it in the subscription price of $4, $5, $6, $7.99, whatever it is, $9.99 a month, whatever it is, and everybody who has an iPhone and Apple TV Plus and all of that can get the Sunday ticket, which would increase the Sunday ticket's market share enormously. But there are several things in that, meaning that local games, there's blackout rules and things that Apple did not want to apply. No, I don't care if there's someone's iPad or their Apple TV app or whatever is in a city with a blackout. No, we're not blacking out anything. They were kind of, this is what we want to do, and there are just rules that they couldn't get past, which is why it didn't happen for them and why it went to YouTube TV, who also has a ridiculous amount of money because they're Google. But if they got all of it, then that would be the bold move the Pac-12 is doing, is putting it over there. Now, I don't think it would be the absolute worst idea for a conference that's mostly on the West Coast to go all in with Apple TV, because I think most of the West Coasters probably use that service and have that service, and especially the Silicon Valley area. I think I would actually prefer that to Amazon, if I'm the Pac-12 presidents, just based on the amount of devices alone. On this table right here, there's 5. Oh, no, actually, how many Apple devices? I've got a watch. There's 3 iPhones and 2 computers. There's an Apple computer over there. We've got
we've got probably a few dozen of whatever.
Yeah, there's like that. But just in this room alone, that's the Pac-12 is kind of on my device. If I do that, now that's more of the future than the present. But if you have to do that and you're lukewarm to everything else, and Apple can maybe give you a nice chunk of money, I would say do that if I'm the Pac-12, especially at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you only have so many options, right? It doesn't sound like they really have like 10 other things that they could say, no, we prefer this. I mean, this looks like it's probably the deal that they're going to get, the best deal that they're going to get. I mean, as it mentions in the article, there's flailing interest elsewhere or lukewarm interest, or certainly not the interest that would have gotten a deal done, a long time ago at this stage, rather than heading into March. And you've had these open rights now for quite a while. And in the meantime, another conference has swooped in and grabbed the cable outlets, and you've still gone on and continued negotiating, and there's been all this trash talk about realignment and all that, and you've still gone on and been negotiating. So, I mean, yeah, at some point, like, that's the whole thing with the story. At some point, they have to sign a deal with somebody. Like,
somebody has to
carry them. Eventually, you have to sign a deal. So if it's Apple, great for them. Again, I have not been anticipating their death. I never for 1 second thought that there would be 0 TV deal. But again, it's all about the numbers. So what are we talking about? I think there was the mystery over the landing spot, like conversation about that. So yeah, certainly Amazon was what we thought maybe a week ago. Now today it's Apple. Kind of feel like we're going all the way back to the very start, quite frankly, because Apple was a mentioned outlet for them just because of, there's a lot of Silicon Valley alums and that whole thing. If you'll remember that months and months and months ago, that was just a logical choice for them. So now we're back at square one, almost, it feels like, with Apple and the Pac-12. And maybe that's just because it makes the most sense, and maybe because that's just the right fit for them. And if so, great. But there's a lot of details missing from this. Primarily, what's the money? And what are we talking about exposure-wise? Is every Pac-12 game on this network, like Paul's suggesting? I can't imagine that would be the case, to have it all exclusively streaming. There'd have to be, you would think, some element of ESPN here, or I guess that'd maybe be your only other option for late Friday nights or something like that. But, yeah, I mean, let's see what the numbers look like, if, in fact, this is the path they're going to go down, and, then let everybody take it from there as far as, talking trash and all that. But this is about, I mean, you just switch the names Apple and Amazon. This is basically where we were a week ago. It's just a different outlet, but mostly streaming is what they're looking at. And look, they might be on the cusp of the future, or this might be like when they launched the network and it was a total disaster that they are now years later trying to get out from under.
Well, here's the thing. They have a 10-year, $2.5 billion agreement, Apple TV Plus does, with MLS. That's a ton of money. As you mentioned, they have all the money in the world to stream all of the league's games with an all-inclusive package that is $99 for subscribers. Now, if you can get yourself on a streamer, that's great. If you can get money for that, that's great. But if it's going to be tied in to how many subscribers they get, then you get in return, that can get to be a little bit dicey.
That's the per inquiry sales, which we have to do sometimes in our business. Is like, okay, yeah, we'll throw up a link, and if people click it, then we'll get money. If it's very minimal effort to us, that's fine. But that's the Pac-12's burden. Here's another thing. I'll just suggest this about Apple. I don't know if you guys remember this, but several years ago, we all woke up in the morning, and on our iPhone, in your music app, or at that time it was iTunes, was a U2 album for free for everyone in the world who had an iPhone. Now, getting past the fact that Bono was such an arrogant AWOD that he thought everyone in the world likes my band and they would love this free album, Apple bought that from him, and they did it, mostly just to show that they could. But if I'm the Pac-12, I'd say, look, you can have all of it, but we want the Bono deal where everybody in the world gets Pac-12 blasted, and that was by far U2's lamest album. And he had it for free, and it took me years to get that thing out of my music. Years.
Oh, I see that pop up when I got playlist or whatever. I see that pop up. If Apple were to make an agreement, then it would presumably produce more than just football for the Pac-12, possible production from the Pac-12 network. We've discussed the network before and how they've struggled with that. Apple, though, let's not forget, were they not involved in wanting the Sunday ticket, the NFL Sunday ticket? That never happened. So, but this is at least something that you can kind of grab onto. Whether or not the Pac-12 and whether or not Apple TV Plus do this remains to be seen. That's from Andrew Marchand in the New York Post, also, of course, a part of the Sports Business Journal with his podcast with John Alran.
Yeah, they have baseball too, right? Friday night baseball. So would there be any crossover there early in the season? I don't know what their schedule looks like, but would there be like any August, or you don't really, any September Friday night games that you'd have to flip out with the Pac-12 football?
I don't know.
They have Apple TV Plus began with live Friday night baseball games last season.
Doesn't seem. I mean, you could have more than one thing on. I suppose it's just streamers, so you can have like 20 things on.
Remember the text or the email I received last week from someone that lives in the West Coast that this is kind of how people are consuming a lot of things as far on the West Coast. The question is, how much are they going to offer? How much, if anything, and maybe none, tied into how much and how many subscribers they get. But here is, at least it's Apple. I think most everyone thought it might be Amazon for the longest of time. Bob Thompson is very close to rejoining us at some point this week, just waiting on a little bit more information he's trying to gather, but that would be great to get him on if we can here in the next day or two, or at least this week. All right, coming up, it's 4:38. Let's see, a couple of Daniel. Well, I've never watched the Pac-12 if that comes true. MP going to catch Washington versus Washington State, Oregon State on FaceTime. This is really the audience you want. And I'm not going to go there. If this works for them, because we don't know. This could be maybe something that really just kind of is really good. I don't know enough about the business with that.
Well, I'll put it this way with streaming is I don't think Apple's just one that everybody has automatically. I mean, you can buy Apple products, and they give you like 4 months free of TV. So if you want to go buy some headphones and get your whole football season paid for, then you could do that. But it's not one of like my priority streamers. Like, I mean, as far as programming goes, it's not one where I'm like, yeah, that's right at the top of the line. I would, in this case, I would basically go to Apple to make sure I watch the Pac-12. And I don't know, as somebody who, I love college football, but I'm not going to be spending all my money to watch it. You know what I mean? Like, if there's another game on ESPN2 on a late Friday night when I get home from high school football, I'm not, like, worried about jostling for Oregon State and Washington State, no offense. So I'm curious that, if most of their audience has it, on the West Coast and all that, that makes sense. But I'm curious of how many casual fans of the conference would pony up specifically for Pac-12 football on Apple TV. Or do you just already have it? And I'm not talking about that scenario, but would you go get Apple TV for the Pac-12? I wonder just how many people that would involve.
Well, let's read some of the comments on the chat room real quick, because a lot of people also have their opinions on this too.
Yeah, but that's what they would be banking on, is that Pac-12 fans would go find it.
Right.
And then what they'd be risking is that no one else would.
From Polo Bear, Apple isn't even the leading streaming service. If my school's president was okay with that move when they could be on ESPN and Fox, I would want them fired. Benjamin Hawks, they want viewers on Apple, assuming they really are interested. Let's see. St. Louis Bengal, pay to watch the Pac-12. Why would I do that? Let's see here.
And as much as streaming might be the future, that is a mentality of a lot of people. Like, I mean, you could say the same thing if the Big 12 was all of it was on ESPN Plus. Like, I don't know. Everybody's like, I gotta go buy ESPN Plus to. I mean, you gotta have it to watch certain games. But if it was the whole shebang, and that's why the details are important. Like, how much money are they making? Because if they're making way more money. Or they're making more money than if there's firmly like the third place conference or what have you, then are we still joking about it? I mean, probably not as much, right? Because I think the thought probably is like, oh, well, not only are they going to be mostly streaming, which we don't know for sure, but it's all going to be behind a paywall, which we don't know for sure. And, it's not going to be as available, which we don't know for sure, elsewhere. So there's a lot of details, like what partnership do they have outside of Apple, and whether or not all of it would be on there. What does the money situation look like? And, like how many people can be expected to go and pay out of pocket just to simply watch those games on another streaming network?
RH5, I'm just having a hard time comprehending that the Pac-12 may not get a TV deal with the primary provider being ESPN or Fox. We've heard that CBS is out, at least now. We've heard that Fox may not be in because of what they're doing as well elsewhere, and really what also might be down the road in the future. And we've heard that ESPN might not be out. ESPN might need those late night time spots.
But they might not be in as much as they want them to be, so ESPN might say we're in for this.
Right, and he's saying that in the end, if this is the case, and again, we don't know, this is just something that's a report. Andrew Marshall's really good. The Mountain West then might end up with more exposure television-wise than the Pac-12.
Well, what you risk with going all streaming, and the problem with streaming is, again, just the functionality of it, of the fact that I have to leave a game completely to go to another game and search it, as opposed to just hitting previous on my remote for my cable or satellite. And that's how you kind of, I can't tell you how many games I've accidentally watched as a, in this job of, okay, we're watching, Iowa State and Kansas State's a great game. I hit previous once it's over, and I'm over on ESPN, and holy cow, Washington and UCLA is a barn burner, and I'm locked into that. Well, now I'm watching this Pac-12 game that I might not have gone and sought out before, but if it's all streaming, I'm going to have to search it out. So there's no more accidental viewing of the Pac-12, and that is half of TV, especially after about 9 o'clock p.m., that people watch is what is on. I'm just going to flip around.
How many times did either one of you, and I know I did, when I came back from, let's say, Baylor played a 6 o'clock game or even an afternoon game that was late in the evening and you were trying to just decompress, and you'd turn on the television and there was a Pac-12 game, and I would be glued to it. Mm-hmm. That Pac-12 late night or whatever they used to, after dark. Let's see. Maybe this Apple TV could cause problems with scheduling Power 5 non-conference teams in a home-and-home play. That's from Provo Cougar fan. I'll say this. I am learning technology every day, including even with what I have. But I don't know, like, where do you find it? Is it online? Is it on your laptop? Is it a smart TV? Okay, all right.
It's an app. It's
and
the
I have
same exact
Netflix
thing.
to watch that golf series that I'm now episodes 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, I mean, you can watch it on your phone. You can watch it just like ESPN Plus, just like Apple, Disney Plus, just like Hulu. It's all the same thing, all the exact same thing. So if you have one of those apps, you could have this app just as easily and be able to watch it. And I'm pretty sure they're already locked into your iPhone anyways. Like, it comes with the little TV. I don't even know what the logo is anymore, but I know I've got it on my phone. I can just pop it up and start watching away the movies in my library or Apple TV. But, yeah, I mean, it's not one of the primary ones right now, I think, probably for most people. I don't know what the average audience is for Apple streaming, but, I mean, if they feel like this is going to help grow that and, the money's worth it, then, like MLB, like MLS, they'll add Pac-12 into the fold. I mean, it makes sense if you're trying to expand, but again, a lot of it just comes down to what kind of numbers are we talking about and what kind of exposure are we talking about? Because I do think as much as streaming may be the future, if this is some all-streaming deal, which is hard to imagine, so I'm kind of skeptical that it is, that's a whole other thing than if it's game of the week on Friday night, 2 games a week, and then the rest is on ESPN. Like, that's 2 completely different things to look at. So until we know that for sure, it's hard to say with too much certainty how to feel or even, really know how to feel as far as whether this is bad or this is good. It's just, hey, Apple and the Pac-12 might sign together, but beyond that, we have no clue about all the rest of that. So that's interesting and not all that surprising that they're involved because, again, if you circle all the way back to the beginning, that was a rumored landing spot for them. But look forward to seeing some more details and hopefully more details sooner rather than later because, again, at some point you have to get a deal done and get your future secured. And they know as well as anybody that everybody's on the outside chatting about them right now. So I'm sure they want to get it done as much as anybody.
When we come back, Craig Smoak's off the radar at around 5:15. I had a chance earlier today to visit with Baylor women's basketball coach Nikki Collin. We have not had her on really since the season began. She seemed to not snap, but she was close to. We brought that up yesterday after the loss to Iowa State in double overtime on Saturday. I reached out to Baylor, interviewed her. We'll have part of that on the show at 5:15. The rest of it will be up in the premium section of SicEm365.com. And this is 365 Sports.
Richard Carr, Buick GMC Cadillac, they are the people that you can count on for the life of your vehicle, for great customer service, and for great prices as well over at Richard Carr. Right now they have dozens of cars, trucks, and SUVs on the lot with special pricing and special financing. You can give them a ring or head on over to the dealership and talk to the good folks over there to get more details on, for example, the offers on Sierra trucks. The 2023 GMC Sierra SLT 1500 is a hot ride right now. You can get 2.9% financing on new 2023 GMC Sierra trucks, and qualified buyers can save thousands of dollars. But again, talk to the experts with the great customer service over at Richard Carr. They can fully explain to you the great deal that can be had right now just on one vehicle, for example, being the Sierra, but dozens of others as well. For example, how about SUV, luxury SUV? You can go jump in the Buick Envision right now. The 2023 Buick Envision has a smooth and quiet ride, and you can get special lease payments of $5,000 down cash or trade in at $269 per month and save thousands on a purchase of the 2023 Buick Envision. So again, you kind of have an idea of what you want, head on over to the dealership or give them a phone call, and they will help explain the great price cuts and the great sales that they've got going on right now for each individual vehicle. But the Buick Envisions right now get special financing. The Sierra trucks get special financing. Those are new vehicles, but they've also got plenty of pre-owned vehicles as well that you can inquire about. Plenty of cars and trucks in stock under $20,000. They're all thoroughly inspected, they're affordable, and they're ready to finance for almost any credit rating. Richard Carr has quality vehicles ready to drive today, both new and pre-owned, or maybe you just want some great customer service, you need an oil change, and you get fender fixed up, whatever the case may be. They have an award-winning service department standing by to keep you on the road. So go to the website, richardcarr.com, or give them a call to see service specials and to set an appointment for quick and reliable service. For 23 years in Central Texas, they've built a reputation as the people you can count on for your automotive needs. Run by proud Central Texans. Log on to richardcarr.com today. Call now or go see them now. Highway 6 at the Imperial exit.
Y'all listen up. Let me tell you something about group meals from Rudy's Barbecue. It's got all you need for all the folks you gotta feed, smoked meat, sides, and more. There's everything down to the tablecloth, just like the one that you see at the store. At a bridal shower, it's better than flowers. In a long distance meeting, it'll pass the hours. It'll feed all the cousins at a family function. It's better than potluck at a church luncheon. Next time you need to feed 10 or more, call and order a Rudy's group meal.
Next in line.
Stepping into a new pair of boots is great, but stepping into the boots of a U.S. Army officer can also add confidence and leadership skills to your son or daughter's career path. There are more than 150 occupational specialties to help them find the best fit for their future. See all the things your son or daughter can achieve in our boots at GoArmy.com. U.S. Army Waco Recruiting Company, 254-598-8131 or 254-776-1543.
Riverbend Liquor and Wine, Lakeshore Drive, North 19th Street, right behind the bank, is a hidden gem in Waco. If you're a fan of bourbon, especially local Texas bourbons, that's where you gotta go. Balcones, TX, Devil's River, whatever it is, they've got it. Riverbend Liquor and Wine, plus the best selection of craft beers in Waco, seasonally churned out throughout the year. Whether it's spring, summer, fall, or winter, Riverbend Liquor and Wine, best selection of craft beers, a speedy drive-through window, and excellent customer service. Find out more on Instagram or just go by and see them. Lakeshore Drive at North 19th Street behind the bank.
There are 26 letters in the alphabet, over 600,000 words in the dictionary, and just 3 of them said together can change everything. Let's order pizza. Those 3 words lead to dough made from scratch and 3 fresh signature cheeses that blanket golden crust in a heavenly melt on Marco's Pizza that'll blow your mind. So visit Marcos.com to order and stop by Marco's Pizza in Belmead, China Spring, Woodway, and in Robinson. Marco's. Pizza lovers get it.
Don Humidor, your home with a 48-foot walk-in humidor with the elite cigar brands from around the world, including the #1 cigar of the year, Aging Room Cuatro Nicaragua. Plus, they have the great brands like Macanudo and Artur Fuente, Rocky Patel, Aston, and so much more. CBD, great for sore muscles, aches and pains, sleep, Vita Dreams, and anxiety, mild depression, general health and wellness. Their staff very knowledgeable on the subject. If anyone is curious about CBD, ask Carol and Ashley. Don Humidor in the Townwest Shopping Center off Valley Mills in Waco.
With so many companies and policies out there, it gets so confusing shopping for insurance, and I never know if I'm getting the policy that's right for me. Luckily, I met the team at the Niche Group Insurance Agency. With the Niche Group, you can go to one company and get access to coverage options from many insurance carriers, and you get to speak to a real person about your specific coverage needs. With the Niche Group, I know I'm getting the right coverage at the right price. If you need insurance, talk to the experts at the Niche Group at 1-800-258-8302.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. It's time for Craig Smoak's Off the Radar. Brought to you by Pickup Outfitters. Since 1997, we've been outfitting trucks, SUVs, and vans at 220 Lake Air Drive or CreateACommotion.com.
All right, welcome back to 365 Sports. Time for Off the Radar, Tuesdays and Thursdays around 4:45. Just taking a look at a grab bag of various headlines across sports. It all depends on the day and the amount of news coming out and kind of how we handle this. Some days it'll be college athletics related, but really just, again, depends on the timing and the headlines of what we've sort of already discussed. And this was actually a note from yesterday. I don't know how we didn't manage to get around to this, honestly. I think we just got so busy talking. It just got kind of pushed to the side, but Red McCombs passed away.
Yeah.
That was a big passing. Billy Joe McCombs, a.k.a. Red McCombs, billionaire from the Lone Star State and one-time owner of the Spurs and Nuggets and the Minnesota Vikings, died Sunday in San Antonio at his home at the age of 95. So a nice, long, fulfilling life there for Red McCombs. But very well respected. He originally bought the Dallas Chaparrals of the ABA and relocated them to San Antonio once upon a time, and that's how the Spurs franchise came to be back in the early to mid 70s. He got the Spurs in as far as like the ABA NBA merger there in 76. He moved he got them into the NBA fully. Was the owner there with George Gervin was the prominent star of the franchise. Eventually sold his shares in 1982 and bought the Nuggets and sold them in 1985. Rebought his share of the Spurs in 1986 and then bought them outright in 1988. So a lot of transactions going on. But George Gervin did say, I can say Red was a friend. The impact he had on this city is unbelievable. We always say everything Red touches turns to gold. It's a reality. His vision for this city, his vision for the Spurs. We named them the Spurs after the city he grew up in, Spur, Texas. So that tells you a lot about his influence on the Spurs. And he has sold them again in 1993, but that was George Gervin talking to the Houston Chronicle. Adam Silver called him a driving force in creating the modern NBA. So, yeah, I mean, had his hands in a lot of pots, but particularly in the NBA, particularly with the Spurs franchise, and very influential man. Y'all's thoughts on Red McCombs passing away?
That's my wheelhouse because I lived in San Antonio for a while. And he, of course, the car dealership and all that. But now that kind of hit me yesterday. I didn't think too much. I didn't know where he was health-wise. But, yeah, he was a dominant figure. Big-time figure in the city of San Antonio and elsewhere.
And at the University of Texas. I mean,
I was going to get to that, yeah.
Huge donor there as well.
Isn't the business school like the Red McCombs? Yeah.
So he, I remember a very famous viral interview he gave. He was not a fan of Charlie Strong and the hire.
I forgot about that,
And, however it played or whatever, I think the thing that, and our friends Jason Mannix and Rob Thompson did that interview at ESPN San Antonio, and however it played was he was just too old to give a crap what anybody thought his intentions were. He just didn't think that Charlie Strong was the right guy to coach the Longhorns and didn't care who knew that he said that. And so, which was probably a pretty tense time for Charlie Strong, and that one of the big money guys, and especially knowing how Texas works, was just so adamant against him. But that's what, that's what went on there. But, yeah, Red McCombs did a ton. It's weird that the Spurs won none of their titles with Red.
Yeah.
Wow, and they won a chunk load of them. I mean, a truckload of them.
5. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he had the Spurs, obviously background, just NBA in general. But as you guys mentioned, I mentioned the Vikings as well and his ownership there. But big benefactor, big-time alum, big-time School of Business name when it came to the University of Texas and just the city of Austin as well. He was a big part of Formula One, coming back to the United States, and, obviously having the Circuit of Americas there in Austin. He was one of those big investors that helped make that happen. And he's got his fingerprints all over Formula One here in the state of Texas and throughout the rest of the country, but also owned 400 businesses during his lifetime. That, according to his website and the ESPN, McCombs School of Business, named for him, obviously, at the University of Texas, and a big-time contributor there. So, I mean, yeah, Vikings, Spurs, the Spurs being in the NBA and what they are now. I mean, UT being, the juggernaut that it is. Formula One being the popular sport that it is, and having a foothold down in Austin and elsewhere. I mean, he was a part of all of that. So Jerry Jones in the ESPN article saying that McCombs was an inspiration and, quote, a true Texas Titan across sports, media, business, and philanthropy. Red's determination, accomplishments, and positive spirit will live forever as he embodied a relentless and passionate approach to life, relationships, and community. So there you go. Red McCombs, highly influential businessman and sports fan, sports owner, passing away yesterday at the age of 95 years old. So there you go with that. And I'm sure they had a lot of discussion and things like that all throughout, Texas circles and whatnot, and rightfully so, because he did play a major role when it came to a lot of their successes. Speaking of Texas, actually, Chris Del Conte has been talking a bit more recently. Y'all see the interviews. He had the lengthy interview in the Statesman. I guess that was yesterday, I believe it was, or maybe it was Sunday. But he talked about a lot of different things, from like the future of the field turf at DKR. He talked a lot about their upgrades and I mean, they've got money flowing already, but, I mean, they really are about to jazz it up, it seems like, for their SEC debut here in a couple years. He said right now they've got new LED lighting. They're upgrading concessions, so that's going to be all addressed here over the next few months. They'll have 22 more concessions area, especially in the upper deck. And he said that with their upgraded lighting systems, the LED lighting, that they'll need a steady diet of night games for that to work, and that he anticipates that will be granted by the SEC, a steady dose of night games. So they're definitely looking at that. He mentioned like new video boards for football's lounge and tennis's facility and things like that. He got into, I guess, again, the field turf situation. Said they want to replace that with natural grass at some point, and that it's inevitable. He also got into other future upgrades that they're looking at, for example, like Dish Falk Field and having some expansion down the third baseline, and got into a lot of different things. But a couple of things that stood out most to me was one about the Longhorn Network. He said that it will be folded into the SEC network after next school year, but he said that their inventory will stay with them, and they will work to create a channel for historical context. So I don't know if that'll be slapped in our faces on our cable
YouTube
bills.
Channel? Or?
I don't know, but I wonder if that's going to be like, if you look at your cable bills, they're going to be like whatever the Longhorn, whatever that network is going to be, if that'll still be like it has been the last several years.
That's actually some of their best content, the historical games.
Arguably, yeah.
I mean, even though sometimes those are nightmares for me with who they're beating, but when I have flipped through it or whatever, of course the live games like tonight against Iowa State are critical too.
Okay, good. As a network, he said all their current LHN content will be shown on SEC Network or ESPN once they join the SEC. So I would assume this would be, maybe like a YouTube channel type of a thing or something along those lines.
They do very well with it. I'll tell you that. They've got a ton of stuff to just put on there and release, almost right away. If they probably have to start doing that now, and getting ready for that. But I think that'd be great. I'm actually knowing that was probably going to happen because the SEC was never going to stand for anybody having their own channel. But I'm more curious what ESPN does with a free. I mean, because it's not to have a channel that goes out to everybody. You have to buy space on a satellite and do that. Do you just sell that space to someone else, or because you've already spent the money and the bandwidth and all these things to do it, is there another channel that ESPN will put there
instead of Longhorn Network?
Because they own
someone told me that they're going to have a bureau, like kind of a bureau in Austin. Now, it may not be just for Texas, obviously, because you're going to have
it's going to be like
Oklahoma.
an SEC headquarters.
Yeah. So they'll be able to broadcast from there. And so who runs it? I don't know. The executive producers, that.
No, my question is the actual technical, like there's going to be an empty channel on the satellite that ESPN owns that they were broadcasting the Longhorn Network on.
Yeah, so maybe it's the SEC too.
Yeah, is it that or is it something all completely new?
Yeah, I don't know how that all works with just that vacant spot, but I don't feel like that would probably be too. I mean, just put another channel there. Yeah. But as far as that goes officially, I don't know how they would do that. But I mentioned all that because I mean, like some of that stuff's interesting. Like I guess you could point to NEAD talking about facilities and things like that, but it is sort of interesting to kind of hear how they're revving it up, and the changes that are happening all in store of this big grand debut here. In a couple years. But one other thing that was very interesting from Del Conte, and also this was as a result of Ross Bjork, A&M's AD, talking as well, is like, what is the big thing that everybody keeps saying that's on the outside looking in as far as Texas goes? Like, just wait, SEC, right? Just wait. Mm-hmm. Just wait till they get their claws in and they throw a little sway here and there. And who knows that better than anybody? Mm-hmm. Texas A&M. And Texas A&M, do you think there's a little bit of a, well, we've been here, we should have, some, upper hand, you would think. And bare minimum, you would think that the very first A&M and Texas game will be played at Kyle Field, right? That has to happen, right?
Well, we always thought that the game, if they played Texas with Houston, would be a game in Houston at their stadium, and that turned out to be true.
Yes, and they're sacrificing probably a good amount of money, but they're also keeping out probably an extra 25,000 Longhorn fans, by doing that. So there is less money, but it also makes sense to keep it more of a Houston Cougars home game by doing it that way. But I just found this kind of funny. So this is from The Athletic, and this is maybe just a sign, and maybe this is just mental games and all of that. But one thing Ross Bjork, A&M AD, is certain of, the return of the rivalry will take place at Kyle Field. Asked why he's so sure, he said, just because of everything that's transpired, and that's something that we've expressed to the SEC, and I guess we'll just leave it at that. He declined to say that Sankey's guaranteed anything or the league office has guaranteed anything, but said, let's just say that this is a very, very firm position from our standpoint. Okay? That's Ross Bjork.
Okay, what did
Del Conte said, that's all news to me. I haven't heard that from anybody. I read it somewhere. I just haven't heard it from the powers that be. As far as I know, that's just internet fodder. And so didn't go and say like, nuh-uh, not so quick, or anything like that. But he did leave the door at least cracked open for the possibility of like, well, maybe it won't be at Texas A&M the very first year, and maybe that's not so official after all. And that's just one of those things that might turn out to be an absolute nothing burger. But I'm just telling you right now, I would not be shocked in any way, shape, or form if somehow they finagle that game to being in Austin, Texas. I swear.
Well, the last time they played it was at Kyle Field, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't the last time?
So highly doubtful. Just the return trip on home and home?
Highly doubtful. I'm just saying.
I'm just saying.
Well, if I'm Ross Bjork and that happens, see, here's the thing.
What are you going to do?
No, Ross Bjork, I'm just going to be mad. But if I'm Greg Sankey and I do that to Ross Bjork, I better be ready for Ross Bjork to not be off the phone for a long time.
Yeah, but
that would be one of those. It'd be a one-sided conversation, even with Sankey, right? Or you get in your little Lear and you fly to the SEC headquarters and you. Like, I've seen some of these other theories that the SEC eventually will move from Birmingham or whatever it is to Dallas because, that happened in the big. Those are the things that, it'll be interesting to watch, see how some of those things change if they do in the next 2 to 5 years.
But that's just, that's the return of the rivalry right there. That's that kind of petty stuff or, little quips that...
Now it's not whether they're going to play, and now it's where are they going to play.
Now this is a whole thing of where are they going to play this game, and when's it going to be played, and is it going to be in College Station? It better be in College Station, right? Right?
Yeah.
Right? And I don't know.
I never saw any promises of that. Well, I understand where A&M looks at it. I do.
Jimbo threw out a couple the other day. I don't know if it was the other day, but when he was asked about it, he said, I think, probably Texas and LSU will probably be our other ones, but I could see where I think he said, well, if that happens, I think Mississippi State would replace Texas if they weren't an every year thing. But the SEC is not stupid enough to bring Texas back to the SEC and not have that rivalry every year. That would be ridiculous. They both cut off their nose to spite their face television-wise by not playing it afterwards. But, at least not after a 5-year cooling off period and bringing it back. That could have been huge. But they had to do it this way to get the game back. But, this is going to be...
there's going to be little fights like that break out, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they go.
And what's going to be a problem is if you want to publicly have this, and Sandra Green, I mentioned the last game between Texas and A&M was at Kyle Field because they kicked a field goal at the end of the game, and just like
everybody involved remembers. Yeah, there's been
So, but it's not the stuff that's public; it's the stuff underneath. Who's working the back channels trying to make some little changes?
Yes.
And how do they go about doing it? Or in the SEC, will that be allowed? Is they going to say, hell no, we're going to talk about this amongst each other in a group?
And obviously college football is a much more national sport than even it was, when A&M and Texas broke up. And now that that little, back and forth sniping is going to go on in the SEC, which gets more coverage than every conference anyway, I can't wait for college football fans around the country to see what we all did in Texas and among those two fan bases for the entirety of both of their existences, that there is not, sometimes you can say with a rivalry, they hate each other, but there's a mutual respect. Like they hate each other, but they respect each other. They don't have petty fights. They just don't like each other.
How many actual rivalries, without getting off on a tangent, because there's more stories, actually hate each other? Like, truly hatred.
Like
Alabama,
Ohio State,
Auburn?
Baylor, TCU.
Yeah, Baylor, TCU, Ohio State, Michigan. But, there are those. And then there are the ones like A&M and Texas that there is not a single warm emotion between those two places. Not one. There's not a negotiation in that. There's not a this is better for both of us kind of a thing. It is.
Well, now there's going to be because they're part of the same league.
Yeah.
So that's from an A&M standpoint, their bit of leverage is not leverage anymore because now here comes Texas, and if even that's Del Conte just poking the bear, it's still funny, and that's the kind of petty stuff again that will be a part of a regular media routine now between those two because they're going to be playing again, and that is one part of it that will be, other than just the game itself, but for outside observers, just having that pettiness back. And hey, now you talk, but now you actually have to go play in a few months. That'll be nice rather than
we don't care about them. They don't need us. We don't. I'll tell you this is that